Hi everyone, it's Catherine and Claire, and we're here with our last installment of our Game of Thrones reread. I'm having a glass of wine to celebrate. So, are you having a glass of something to celebrate? So we are celebrating. And I think, bar the week of the hurricane, I don't think we missed a week, so that was good. Yeah, so we have a Dany sandwich, Dany 9 to Dany 10, just 5 chapters. It's kind of the wrapping up of the book. I'm not sure if we'll have a huge amount to say. I'm expecting this to be mainly Dany centered, but we'll see what the Oracle, as John says, what the Oracle has to say.
The barnacle.
And just, I'll say it now and I'll say it at the end. We're going to come back on the 7th of January with our reread of Clash. I'll make an announcement video at some stage this week or next week, giving you a breakdown of how we'll do it. It might take us 11 or 12 weeks to get through Clash because it's slightly bigger, but I'll make sure to make an announcement, and I'll say that again at the end, but it is the 7th of January. So that's a Sunday as well. So we're okay with the Sunday, Claire? You still okay with doing Sunday?
Yeah, that's perfect for me.
We can change it anyway, you know, if you have to be somewhere or whatever, we can change it to the Saturday or Sunday. But hi Val, how are you? So Claire, Dany 9. How did you feel about Dany 9? Poor old Drogo.
I thought that this was a chapter that was probably the most symbolic of Dany and the birth of the dragons, to the point where I'm surprised that I was surprised when I first read this that dragons actually, you know, arrived at the end of this book. On the surface of it, it's very loud and clear about Dany being the last Targaryen. Excuse me, I've got a frog in my throat. The dreams. So the symbolism in the dreams, the quote about "Don't wake the dragon" goes from like that progression from "Don't wake the dragon" to no, don't want to wake the dragon, to want to wake the dragon, to wake the dragon, and then the dragon. So there's this progression throughout the chapter of Daenerys. This whole rebirth, fire and blood, it's very prevalent throughout this chapter. I think that it's become more apparent to me that what Mirri Maz was trying to do was like some shadow binding with the shadows, and death was in the tent, and only death can pay for life, and no light can hold back the shadows, so the shadows touch the baby. So as soon as she went, you know, she felt Rhaego inside her before she went into the tent, and then apparently when this baby was born, he never would have lived. So he faltered as soon as he, you know, that basically the price, only death can pay for life, that was the price. Now, whether or not what I was saying about last week, Mirri Maz knew this and knew that it would, because it's very thematic for me around the dreams being, there's lots of reference to Viserys and Drogo and Rhaegar and Rhaego as well, and it's almost kind of like they appear and then there's something that says no, not them, and then so Viserys appears, Rhaegar appears and then just vanishes into mist, so she can see these other Targaryens and Drogo, which again is kind of a powerful part of this whole blood magic mix, but it just ends up being Dany at the end of it, which to me just means that this is all about Dany. Dany is symbolic of, she is the last Targaryen, and it speaks really loud and clear about that in this particular chapter. I thought it was interesting that but before she suffocates Drogo. And she's having these kind of fever dreams that Miri Mazda is the one that gave her the sweet wine potion. And then when Dany was sleeping and asking for her eggs, it was Miri Mazda that actually brought Dany the eggs. And I do think that there is some, you know, Miri Mazda she was a god's woman of the Lamb Men. So why was she messing around in like blood magic and fire magic? You know, why was that? What was that about? Maybe it didn't work out quite, but maybe she wasn't skilled. She wasn't a skilled shadow binder of a shy, which means that it went wrong or something went wrong, and that was a consequence with Drogo. But I think this all leads up to the price being paid was the price of everything that happened to allow the dragons to be born, which we get at the end of the next chapter, the very last chapter in the book, which was actually quite a short chapter. I was surprised. It didn't take me as long to get through it as it did some of the others. So yes, it's kind of like Dany has these dreams about visions where she sees Viserys saying something, or Rhaegar saying something, or she sees this vision of Rhaegar grown up with, like, you know, this kind of half Dothraki, half Targaryen, and then they just vanish. And as she wakes up, it's this kind of it's a very, very magical, very symbolic, and to me it underlines Dany is the last Targaryen. There are no others. The others might have thought that they were the dragon, but actually Daenerys is truly the last dragon. It even says in this chapter she saw Rhaegar and being referred to as the last dragon, and then his face changes into Dany's face, and you know, it's yeah, I think that's, I mean, apart from the quote, the famous quote from Miri Mazda, where you know, he will burn no cities now. he will yeah. You know, he'll do this, that, and the other. No, the sun rises in the west and sets in the east. When the seas go dry and the mountains blow in the wind, and when your womb quickens again, you will bear a child. And you bear a child, that's when he'll come back to you. That's when Drogo will come back to you. I don't know whether you want to talk about that quote. I mean, there's lots of fan theories about that means.
I don't know if people I think I'm probably guilty of that as well, reading too much into it. And I said this to you last week. The 3 chapters, 8, 9, and 10, they're very much on Drogo centered. Like, they're very much, like, as I said to you, he's the calloused Cal. Like, it's not just Dany that's important. Dany is the Targest Targ. He's the calloused Cal. That's where the magic, I think, is happening. And this is about him. Like, people talk about her not being able to give birth, but that's not what the prophecy says. It's all of those things have to happen for him to come back. Doesn't mean she can't give birth. So I mean, the line is, yeah, mountains blow like leaves. I was wondering, was that going to have something to do with Mountains of Dorne? Something like, at the moment I'm teaching Macbeth, and there's that prophecy where Birnam Wood comes to Dunsinane, and it's like all of Malcolm's men camouflaged with trees from Burnham, branches from Birnam Wood. And I know that's that particular set of prophecies in Macbeth are, George R. R. Martin has spoken about them a lot as being really influential for the prophecy in this series, especially Cersei's prophecy. Cersei's prophecy is self-fulfilling, like the first set of prophecies for Macbeth, but the second set with Macduff and Malcolm and all that, it's really influential, I think, here, and with the other, like, Azor Ahai kind of stories / prophecy. But yeah, I kind of think there's probably a lot of metaphor built in here. So yeah, I'm not sure. I don't know really what to make of it, whether it's all symbolic. Or it did occur to me that maybe the prophecy just refers to the last chapter, in that he is like, they have to wait for the sun to go down so his star can rise through the fire, like Drogo's star. That the idea that the mountains turning to leaves, I don't know, maybe something to do with what she's burning and how it looks like leaves, the ash. I don't know. I might be reading too much into that one. But definitely in the last chapter, the symbolism is all to do with sex and marriage. And it's almost like she's giving birth to the dragons. So her womb, in a sense, is quickening. In that sense. So it may just be the last that last chapter that it's referring to. But yeah, I don't really know what else to take from it. I don't know if it'll be, I don't know if it'll just be about him.
There's a she wants to know when she will see Drogo again, and the answer is this cryptic, what some take as prophecy. I think it could just be a, you know, she could have been saying any old thing.
Messing with her, yeah.
But we've got when the sun rises in the west and sets in the east, and a lot of people think that that is to do with Quentin Martell, the son of the sun, and that he sets off to the east on his journey. So we've already had that. When seas go dry, that's the Dothraki Sea, which we already know. Mountains blown in the wind like leaves could be a number of things. I think one of the things that I've heard people say is that's like the pyramids in Marine are referred to as mountains, and when the dragons kind of, you know, destroy them, that's like leaves blown in the wind. But I read it this time and thought it could actually be the mountain.
That's like what I was thinking as well.
Yeah.
How would he blow like leaves? I wasn't sure. And
well, the only thing I can think of is just being incinerated.
Yeah.
And then just ash blowing away like leaves.
But then the line that she repeats the most here and in the last chapter is, "If I look back, I'm lost." And I was kind of thinking, like, I know you like when George gives clues to the readers. Is that a clue to us? Don't reread too much.
It could be, yeah. That line, "If I look back, I'm lost," where does she get that from?
I don't know. It's similar to Bran's line, like that he's not supposed to see Jaime yet. Like, it's kind of a similar kind of thing. Don't get lost in ego just yet. Don't look back just yet. That's how I kind of see it. Because when she wakes up, she's not a princess. She's a queen.
Yeah.
Like the princess is gone. So she doesn't even ask for the baby first.
Yeah. There's definitely a process that's happening through this chapter, and it's to do with the magic for sure.
Yeah.
But also I think this is just outlining that Dany definitely has, in big neon letters, that Dany has a destiny. This is what this chapter is saying, that there's definitely, you know, yes, Dany may have a child, you know, with the words from Mirri Maz, when your womb quickens again and you bear a child. In a way that makes no sense. So she'd have a child with somebody else before she sees Drogo again. I don't, you know, that doesn't sound ideal.
But also, what does it mean to see Drogo again?
Yeah, exactly.
Also, can I just throw it out there? How do we know that the baby's dead? How do we know that that the baby wasn't taken? Like, seeing Drogo again maybe seeing a child that looks very like Drogo.
Maybe. I mean, the description was horrible. Wings of a bat, full of worms.
The description is horrible, but like, who, like, how do we know, like, for sure? Because like, who's there when she gives birth? The handmaids, right? And Mirri Maz. One of the handmaids will betray her. Where, you know, we get a prophecy later on where it talks about betrayal. maybe there's a missing baby. Maybe. I don't know.
I mean,
I've never heard it said.
We don't
so
know.
I might be reading a lot into it, but I feel like this time reading it, I was like, wait a minute. Who in this chapter do we know saw the baby? Like Jorah didn't see it, right?
No. Well, not that. I'm not sure. I mean,
I don't know.
He talks about wanting to escape with her a couple of times in the chapter before, and also in the last chapter. You know, it's kind of like, you don't have to do this. We can run away together, and you know, his ridiculous romantic notion. Whether or not he actually saw the baby die or stillbirth or this horrendous monstrosity,
it would be unusual for him to have been allowed to stay first. Birth, I guess. Like, I know he carries her into the tent, but yeah, no, it's just something that maybe seeing Drogo is seeing someone that looks like Drogo.
I think, though, under those circumstances, even if Rhaego was born absolutely natural and there was nothing wrong with it, that Mirri Maz-Duur would have killed it.
Or, as you said, she has lots of connections with Ashai, with Marwyn as well. So there's a lot of currency in the blood of royalty, especially the blood of a Dothraki Targ.
Yeah.
Like, huge amount.
Yeah.
Now, I know there's lots of missing babies. I'm just like throwing it out there. I don't really buy into this. But, you know, there are lots of unaccounted for kids throughout this series. It wouldn't surprise me.
We don't know for sure. We've got to say that
no.
we don't know for sure. Yeah.
And even that line, her womb quickens again and you bear a living child, like maybe it already has. Like, I don't know. I'm just throwing it out there. The idea that it took something out of Jorah, like she sees Jorah as being very gaunt, having gone into the tent, I think is quite interesting as well. There's a couple of things though, more than her like prophecy or bullshit riddle or whatever it is. The dream I think is more interesting because it really reminded me of Bran and what he went through after the fall. The fact that she sees the ghosts of kings lining a hallway. Now I know that's Tar kings more than likely, but it also made me think of the crypts in Winterfell.
Yeah.
That might be something to do with that, and also like this kind of idea that the Red Door is her salvation, like that's what's going to save her. I just wonder, will we see the Red Door? Do you think we will see that Red Door in the series?
I don't think so. I think it's just a notion of home to her. That's what it conjures in her head. But it's it's idealized in her brain as this is what it means to be home.
And the other thing is, of course, killing Drogo. And she tries to have sex with him. She tries to please him. She tries to kind of, there's still that childish hope in her that love will cure all. And I think the fact that it doesn't kind of hardens her.
Yeah.
Especially going into the last chapter.
Yeah.
But yeah, quite interesting as well that she doesn't ask for the baby and the dragon's eggs are warm. Again, that idea that Mirri Maz-Duur is obviously working for herself and trying to, as you were saying, shadow bind or whatever. It is nice that it's going to come up again in the next chapter with Tyrion, the Shadowlands, the shadow binder from Ashai, and the person that talks about it is Tywin, in a fearful kind of way, or at least he's not scoffing it, like it's like, no, this is a serious thing. Like, it's a serious thing for shadow binders to exist. They're not treated like anyone else in the story, any other kind of religious entity, or religious kind of, I guess, mediator. So if Tywin Lannister is taking it seriously, then we should probably take it more seriously. We should definitely not take Mirri's word for it. She may not be that powerful, but the fact that she has all these connections and she can speak 4 languages or something, like there's something like for Lamb people that seems to be a little bit more than you need to keep your Lamb people in check. So there's definitely something going on there.
Well, yeah, she seems to be like the wise woman of that tribe, doesn't she? She talks about wisdom in the last chapter.
Yeah. You
know, you have to, it's beyond you, child. Like, you know, blood magic requires, it is for the wise.
Yeah. And just before we even go on to the next chapter and on to the last Dany chapter, it feels like Dany's story of anyone else's in the book, with the exception of Robert sending assassins after her. It feels like her story is the most standalone story. And I certainly have not overlooked Dany, but I haven't always, I guess, respected her story in the same way as I have done on this reread. I've actually really enjoyed it on this reread. And maybe part of that is because the show is now all Westeros, so maybe I missed it. I missed the fact that we were in the East. But I just think her story, and I know I've said this before with characters like Arya, I think Dany is the most recognizable of the character that we're going to see now, even when going into Winds. I think she's definitely had the biggest transformation from the beginning to the end. But yeah, so the one with the least transformation, Tyrion.
Yeah.
Like, I feel like his story, I love Tyrion chapters, but I feel like we don't get as much out of, I know we've said that for nearly every Tyrion chapter, haven't we? So little to say about this chapter, and then we end up talking for a while. But I really have very little to say about this chapter. I've more to say about Tywin than Tyrion, for sure.
Well, this chapter to me just felt like the dynamics between the Lannisters, all of them, the siblings, like Tyrion gets very defensive of Jaime. But then he also, this realization of like, oh, hang on, I know what's going on here. You think Jaime's dead, how dare you? So now you think that, I've been elevated into a position of importance within this family. But there's this underlying really sad, like cripplingly sad story, which is that age-old Tyrion is a young man who's desperate for his father's approval, like completely desperate for his father to kind of, and he feels it when he's given this position as the Hand, and he knows it's probably just a cursory thing, or it's just, because Tywin has grave concerns about Cersei and Joffrey. But just that sense of he's bristling with pride that his father, recognizes him, and Tywin feeds into this. He's saying things like, "Oh, you surprise me. You've taken a few lessons from me," and there's this kind of like they seem very similar. They seem very much like father and son to me. Yeah, I think it's interesting when with Tywin's tactics, he just listens to everybody babble on, and then he'll just turn around. He's kind of similar to Bolton, that sort of unassuming, but then he'll step in and say, no, this, we can't just sue for peace. They've got my son. Yeah, so we hear here again this kind of setting up for the next book. This kind of clash of kings, with the news of Renly marrying Marjorie Tyrell and claiming the throne from the south. So we get this sense of Tywin's camp being trapped on all sides. So in this scenario, it seems easy, really, to think that Tywin would be at least thinking about negotiating with Roose Bolton at this point.
Definitely.
Yeah.
I think he's the elephant in the room right up until the end of the cat chapter, actually.
Yeah.
Sorry.
No, I was just going to say, obviously, Tywin has got grave concerns about Joffrey, and just things like, he's absolutely astounded that about what they did to Barristan, quite rightly. But yeah, I haven't really got much about this apart from the only other note that I've got is, how did Tywin know that Shay was even in the picture? If he was saying, you know, make sure you don't take that whore to court. It's like the only reason he wouldn't have known that is if he arranged it and he planted Shay to be there. So, you know, that seems quite obvious to me from this chapter. Yeah.
And he wants her to be taken, of course, because then he'll have eyes and ears on Tyrion.
Yeah.
Perhaps had he not even said anything, Tyrion may not have even bought her. So he probably knows, oh, I need to say it because I need to make sure he rebels and takes her.
He's manipulating all of his children, including Tyrion. Tyrion maybe even more so because he's just desperately craving his father's approval.
The thing that Tywin is brilliant at, and probably the best at, is controlling the optics, because he's clearly worried. This is putting him in a position where he has to defend the most deplorable acts on Joffrey and Cersei. He can't control it. And he can't go to King's Landing either, because then he's going to leave the West open because he's no one there he can trust. What I think is interesting is he's trying to control the optics, like by sending Tyrion to King's Landing. He's sending his only son, but it's also his son who's a little person, so he can send him to Cersei, and that will embarrass Cersei, the fact that she'll have to listen to Tyrion. So it controls the optics from the outside and the inside. It's kind of saying, you know, Tyrion will be my eyes and ears, but from the outside it's going to look like Joffrey is still in charge, I guess. The other thing is he's going to pick Harrenhal to go to, even though that's not his. He shouldn't be able to just go there. It's Slint's. He just can't go there, but he is. And even when he's told, well, that's like bad luck, like that place is pretty ominous, I wouldn't go there, he still says, I don't believe in that shit. I think he definitely believes in that shit, or at least he knows that other people believe in it, and that's the important thing. It'll look like he is, like he's just fearless by going there and taking that. And the other thing then, of course, is he needs to keep the idea, or what am I trying to, the facade going, that he still gives a shit about Jaime, and that he hasn't given him up, but he, like Tyrion says, he's totally given him up. And Tywin, what I thought was interesting, in front of all the other lords, he focuses on Renly. And Renly's doing this and Renly's doing that, because obviously Renly is known to be like this kind of bit of a peacock kind of fighter and high garden of all the money. But then when he sends everybody out of the room, one of the first things he says to Kevin and Tyrion is, it's Stannis I'm really worried about. Stannis is, I don't know what the hell Stannis is doing, because he knows Stannis is probably around the same age or close enough to, he knows Stannis now, no, not close enough to his age, but he'll definitely know Stannis is ruthless when it comes to military tactics. And the fact that he has like sellswords, he's got a shadow binder, he's got all this thing, that's more terrifying than anything else. Because also the other thing that Stannis doesn't have, Stannis doesn't have to marry anyone to get anything. Like Renly had to marry Marjorie to get Highgarden on board, but Stannis doesn't have to offer anything. So that's like the terror. It's really an unknown that Tywin can't.
Yeah, they would have known each other as well from court. And the tales of Stannis and his iron will, you know, he'll bend before he breaks, are well known throughout the realm. So,
and I'm sure now, and he talks a lot about Varys and the small council and how inept they are. And yeah, of course, he would have known how like organized, how much of a perfectionist Stannis is. So that has to be worrying for him, because you don't have any idea what Stannis is doing. And he is the big, he's the big unknown going into Clash. Hey, John, how's it going? AU's in the house.
Hey, John.
I've been listening and driving. Oh, drive safe. Hope the weather is okay. I can't believe Shay and Tywin were not together in camp, but what is Bran's connection to Tywin? Was he in the Brave Companions? Maybe.
Oh,
I think he says it though again though. Doesn't it come up in this chapter about the Tyroshi, how they betrayed Jaime, and that you can't really trust anybody whose sword you have to buy, kind of thing. Doesn't he make some sort of which I also thought was interesting about the Tyroshi thing. I wasn't sure. I felt like this chapter we were thrown a lot of names and a lot of things where people are. Like we got mention of where Beric is. We obviously heard from a mountain. There was a lot of stuff being thrown at us. So I thought, yeah, that's kind of, and Tywin was just kind of taking it in without responding anything. It's like he's constantly setting up where all the different chess pieces are going. But the one big one obviously is Stannis. He doesn't know what, and yeah. But what do you think? Was Bran in the?
I think that's quite an interesting thought, Bron being in the Brave Companions, because the Brave Companions at the moment are owned by Tywin, aren't they?
Mm-hmm.
He's the one that's sending them off on missions and things, and yeah, and they're made up of sellswords, and there's obviously a fair amount of skill. He just seems to have appeared from nowhere,
yeah,
and just ended up, fighting for Tyrion's honor. So I think it's definitely more than likely that both Shay and Bron have been planted into Tywin's storyline, and they're completely from the pocket of Tywin. Yeah, I can't remember whose theory it was, but I remember a theory once about the Brave Companions being possibly being Varys's creatures as well. Which kind of would make sense if you think about some of the things that they did. But yeah, I think you could be right there, John. I think there's every chance that Bron could be connected via Tywin to the Brave Companions.
I think Bron will be back, because I know he's kind of out of it now, out of the series, where we are going into wins. He's not really He's not really a player as much.
No, he's been at Stokeworth for a while, hasn't he? Last we heard was that he'd had a baby and named it Tyrion.
Yeah, I think I do think as well, just about Tywin and the optics. I think the dishonoring of Barristan Selmy was disgusting to him because of how that looks from the outside. It's so unnecessary. Like killing Ned and stuff, and even when he says, like, Tyrion says there's no way we're getting peace, we killed Ned Stark, that isn't happening. And it's funny because in Kat's chapter it'll be like, no, that isn't happening, they killed Ned. But yeah, Tyrion is just there, like, there's the optics of everything is just so dodgy. And I really do think, even though Tywin tends to be a few paces ahead of everybody, the Stannis question is bothering him. There's too many variables at the moment.
And the whole thing as well about everybody, and in this chapter Tyrion seems quite surprised by this, but everybody completely underestimated the Northerners and Robb and what they were capable of,
and embarrassingly overestimated Jaime.
And
that's the biggest problem for him now in controlling the situation, because there's more room for embarrassment with Jaime. He's not that smart, and you don't know what's going to happen there. And of course, that is what happens. There does become a sense of embarrassment with Jaime. Well, yeah, there's. I feel like right now there are too many variables, but he's starting to rein in how much information he lets out. So he's already sent everybody out of the room and just told Kevin and Tyrion stuff. Then Kevin is sent out, and then he talks to Tyrion. And now he's sending Tyrion away. So he doesn't have anyone he's going to share stuff with anymore. So we won't really get a good insight into what Tywin's thinking from now on. But yeah, it's that was the Tyrion chapter, and I feel it's kind of started where we met Tyrion talking about bastards and fathers with Jon, and ended with Tyrion with his father. And ironically, he's now the favorite kid at the moment,
Yeah.
the most reliable one. So I guess for him, and the way he said, oh, he wouldn't have wanted to be Jaime and stuff, even though Tywin pretty much sent him out to die. It's kind of funny that Jaime's the one who's caught. But yeah, and then we go to Jon 9, unless you have anything else to say about Tyrion.
No, we can move on to Jon.
I kind of felt like, I don't know, I forgot this was his last chapter in a way.
I thought this happened much earlier on.
So did I. Yeah, so did I. He leaves twice, right? Or he at least thinks about deserting twice. So this is the second time. So
yeah,
I didn't love this chapter. But there's certain things in it. I loved Mormont in this chapter more than anything else.
yeah.
And I think the reason I didn't like this chapter is because he focuses so much on honor, and Jon focuses on honor and Mormont, and it's like, come on, this is the thing that got Ned Stark killed. You just leave that behind now. And it leads on from Tyrion's chapter, where he reminds himself of what Tyrion said, that most men would rather run from a hard truth than face it, or something like deny a hard truth than face it. And that's very true of Tywin in the last chapter. He's like, Jaime's going to die. I have to move on now. I have to move on with a plan that keeps that in mind. I can't move on with a plan that also allows for his rescue. So yeah, I just thought that was interesting, just that kind of nice tie-in with Tyrion. It makes me think that their journey is going to be more important. They will have to come back together for some reason later on in the story. There's some reason why we met Tyrion through Jon, and now the last time we see Jon in this book, he's thinking about what Tyrion said. I think there's something there with the two of them. I liked the idea that Ghost disappears for a little bit, and Jon says, he gets worried, then he's like, oh, nothing can kill a ghost except a bear. So I thought that was interesting. I like the symbolism of that. And apart from the stuff that happens with Mormont and going north of the wall and all that kind of thing, I think the bit I liked the most, I have a chapter that it was just kind of like, meh chapter for me. I obviously liked it the first time I read it, but this time around it was like, oh, I'm just reading this now because I have to. And I thought it was just the idea of him wondering about whether Ned would have executed him or Benjen had he, like, now that he's deserting, like, what would Ned have done with him if he'd been caught? And I wonder what you think. What's the answer to that? I think he would have killed him.
No, he would have
Really?
cuffed him round the ear and sent him back.
You think?
Yeah.
I don't know. The question made me pause for long enough to think. We've talked a lot, obviously, about what he actually promised Lyanna.
Yeah, I was just saying that we are talking about Ned, I guess. So
yeah, like,
yeah,
we've talked a lot about what he actually promised Lyanna and what he didn't do or did do in that contradicted that promise. And I think even if Jon is even thinking of that, and now he's heartbroken that Ned is dead, if that thought even crossed his mind, it suggests to me that like, Ned isn't, like, we got to see inside of Ned, right? We got to see the man he is, the love he has, but I don't know if the rest of the world really got to see that as much as we did. Like, I think I have this, I'm not speaking for the whole fandom, but I think I have this rose-tinted view of Ned sometimes. Like, he can't have been like this sensitive kid with like a badass brother who went to the Night's Watch and another one who was like, you know, who went to King's Landing to rescue their dad and stuff. Like, there has to be something pretty harsh about him.
Well, he's described as, and comes across as with many other characters, as this long face, miserable, hard-faced northerner that's just, full of honourable intentions, but perhaps a bit naive in terms of what happens outside of the North, like politically and things like that, you know. And also, again, he's also full of insecurities, Ned. We know that from being in his own head. But maybe that comes across to other people. That, you know, there's people who are cripplingly shy in, you know, in generally in everyday life, that come across as, you know, and are described by other people as like really rude and abrupt.
Yeah.
And it's like, actually, no, they're not. It's just they're so shy that it's difficult to communicate, and it comes across as being quite abrupt. So yeah,
Ned is also quite repressed as well. Like, he's repressing stuff about Lyanna. And yeah, like, I know we said that before, would he have gone to the Wall? I think he would have ended up in the Wall, actually. Had Brandon become the Lord, I think he would have gone to the Wall. I don't know. I feel like I know Ned even less after this reread for some reason. Like, I feel I have way more questions about him than answers.
Yeah.
And it's going to be like that, I guess, until the end of A Dream of Spring, which I hope then is the end of A Dream of Spring.
Yeah.
There isn't like a third book after that. I know some people out there, oh no, we want more. No, not if it's going to take this long. By the way, I don't know, like, yeah, obviously we mentioned it when in our conversation before this, but the show, it seems, has unofficially, we've heard that it's 2019 that we're going to see the show for sure. Do you think we'll have the book before then? Do you think I'll have more Ned answers before then?
I think possibly not, actually, because I know a lot of people have been like, oh my God, that's 2 years, but it's not really. We're at the end of 2017, and it'll probably be more like early 2019.
Yeah.
So we're talking about maybe 15 months rather than like 2 years.
It depends on how bad the weather gets and stuff in around the north right now. Like, so it depends.
But if it's only 15 months, then I think what George will do is take the hiatus in the TV show as an opportunity to get things done. But again, continuing at his own pace.
More collections of short stories.
Yeah, possibly.
Yeah, no, I kind of feel he's going to wait until after the show's done.
Yeah.
Because then between Winds and Dream Spring, he'll have enough distance. But sorry, I got sidetracked there. So yeah, that's all I had for. I felt like at the end of this chapter, Jon's story, in comparison to everybody else, it feels like it's going in a way more bleak direction than anyone else. Like, literally.
Yeah.
But also, like, emotionally, like, as we see it, like, Sansa obviously isn't in a good place, but I guess she's getting to marry a king. So, I mean, he's an arsehole, but she has the Hound. I guess Sansa's is pretty bleak, actually. Arya, we at the moment we assume she's going north. We assume she's going home, I guess. Or maybe we don't. Actually, maybe we don't. But I just felt from Jon's, it just felt he's very lost, Jon. He's no mother, no father, no family. So yeah, I think maybe that's why I didn't like it that much.
See, I've got a different opinion of this chapter. I think that it's very heavily laying the foundations for leadership with Jon in this chapter. We're inside his head, and he's thinking about choices and decisions and consequences and loyalties, you know. So he's thinking about all of these things that are really important things that you need to think about in a position of leadership. The process of making decisions and how you arrive at decisions and what the consequence of that is likely to be. This kind of made more sense to me when he's thinking about the journey back being shorter, and I think that's because he knew that he needed to return. He knew, so this kind of sense of duty, but it's more than that. It's thinking about consequences and loyalties, and he thinks again he wanted to die as a Stark, not a deserter. And just a couple of things to point out in this chapter, aside from that, is that there were 7 of them that came to take him back. which immediately reminded me of the 7 at the Tower of Joy. And in his own mind, Jon vows to leave the Wall someday when nobody's looking. You know, he'll leave one day when nobody's looking. And which just, again, you know, makes me think, yeah, definitely he's that's very likely to happen. But when we get to Mormont, the only thing that I've got about this, although I thought it was it's very fatherly and very kind of, you know, this was all set up. We knew you were going to do this. It was all kind of risk managed right from the word go. So there was never any question that he wasn't going to be coming back. And he says, there's a quote, I don't know what it's in reference to, but he says, unless you have a horse with wings like a raven, do you? So that's Mormont saying that to Jon, which just makes me think, well, that sounds to me like Jon will ride a dragon, because a horse with wings like a raven is a dragon. And then obviously we get to hear, I think it's bleak, yeah, but also there's this kind of sense of adventure there about we get to go beyond the Wall. The wildlings are all being like amassing under Mance's leadership. We hear about this king beyond the Wall, and as miserable as Jon was about being in a squire position, doesn't really matter, because he gets to be squire for Mormont, which means he goes out on a, you know, so we know we're going to get to see all of these adventures beyond the Wall and going further into the north. So I think it's, you know, it's closing things down, but it's setting things up for more adventures. And I also think that this is a heavy foundation for, let's consider Jon, even in these early stages, let's consider Jon in terms of leadership and a leadership position.
He also Mormont talks about him needing Stark blood at the Wall, or it's a good idea to have Stark blood at the Wall, or something like that. And then immediately says that they're going away from the Wall.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
Which is it? Yeah. I think it's because Jon is really the only one that we get to hear from in this section, apart from Cat, it's Cat, so, you know, you really feel the pain of losing Ned, I guess. But then it's, yeah, my main question there was about Ned and would he have killed him? But yeah, you're right. There are lots of leadership things here, and yeah, I just wondered about the Stark blood at the Wall, what Mormont meant by that, which is nice going into Cat's chapter, where we get that. A lot of people love what happens at the end of Cat's chapter, and I love it as well. So yeah, it is interesting, just that kind of nice kind of tie-in with the Stark blood, because but that's all I have for Jon. Straight into Cat, and I'm going to let you open it with the first line, because I know that's something you've noticed in every other.
Well, I couldn't not refer to this when she references that it seems 1,000 years ago that she left River Run with Robb. So again, that reference to 1,000 is littered all the way through this first book. And it could be completely, as I've said a million times before, or 1,000 times before, this could just be a reference to it's a big number, or there could be something to it, that this number 1,000 is mentioned so many times, and who it's mentioned by seems to be mentioned by Cat a lot. I think she's the main contender for the amount of times that the number 1,000 has been mentioned. There's a lot, again, like setup and foreshadowing here. So Edmure telling Cat that she will have her vengeance for Ned, and actually the word vengeance, which just runs through Lady Stoneheart like a stick of rock. Interesting that finally in this last chapter of Cat, the 11th chapter in this book, she finally admits to herself maybe she shouldn't have taken Tyrion.
Yes.
You know, but this was your doing, she thinks to herself. No shit, Cat. I was interested to find out what you thought about Hoster at this point, because he's quite, you know, he's kind of compos mentis in a way at this point. He gets worse and he gets progressively worse. One of the first things that he said was, I was afraid. So that could be a number of things. You know, afraid of what? Afraid of just never seeing his children again before he died, which is, you know, justifiable, but could it be something else that he was afraid of? What I wanted to know, and I'm not sure you will know this, but what was Hoster dying of? He wasn't that old.
That was my question. Because I missed that the last time. The Maester is giving him something.
Yeah.
What's the Maester giving him?
We don't know. It just, his symptoms are he's got crabs pinching in his stomach. So that, to me, it's like, has he been poisoned by somebody?
Yeah, or is it cancer maybe? But he's very healthy. So I don't know why, like, he was very healthy.
Yeah. I mean, he would be Tywin's age, thereabouts.
Yeah.
You know, he would be, if Kat's the eldest,
he's
and
the same
she's
age as Jon Arryn, or is Jon Arryn older than him? Jon Arryn would be older than him.
I don't think he's much older than 60.
So yeah, no, I probably even younger than that, right? Because Kat is in her 30s, and if you bear in mind that they have kids quite young,
and she was
the Lord of Riverrun, he would have had to marry young. So, and yeah, so I think I have a lot of questions about Hoster, but we can talk about Hoster after you. Do you want to go through your notes, or do you want to talk a Hoster first?
Just that really. That what was he dying of? Had he been poisoned? What is this obsession with Brynden being married, the Blackfish being married? Like, up until his last breath, almost, he seems to be obsessed about this.
And not Edmure. I still can't get over this. Why the Blackfish and not? It doesn't matter if Blackfish that marries, right?
Exactly. Yeah, it doesn't matter at all. Actually, he's got no claim to Riverrun. He
could just go to the Wall. Like, he doesn't have to get married at all.
No. He wanted to see Lysa, which I thought was quite interesting, because he obviously had something to say to Lysa.
My thing was, are the Maesters, like your theory with the Illuminati, are the Maesters trying to take out that kind of core group? Or is there somebody trying to take out that kind of core group of Littlefinger, for instance?
Maybe.
Is there someone, because it's kind of, it is very suspicious. It sounds like he's gone downhill very quickly.
Well, yeah, there's poisoned, possibly Hoster poisoned. Well, we know what happened to Ned's father, but Tywin, I know we've only recently talked about Tywin, but the obvious thing from the book is that Tyrion, and in the TV show as well, that Tyrion kills his father. But this whole thing, and we'll get to it when we get to it, when Tywin dies and this stink that his corpse gives off, and this whole thing about, like, could he have been poisoned? So was there some sort of secret poisoner? And it could potentially be the Meisters, like some network that are taking out that layer of, you know, the war of the is it the 9 Penny Kings, that generation? Because they're all, I'm just thinking about how that links to Barristan as well, but they all seem very loyal to.
Well, I mean, it wouldn't be impossible for Littlefinger or Varys to have suggested that to Joffrey as well. So, and I say Varys because one thing that's repeated, but we haven't yet seen really, is the idea of it being like a woman, a craven, or a eunuch that uses poison. And there's also that thing with Illyrio, who has this very kind of sickly, sweet smell. Varys has it himself. You know, this kind of lavender smell, I think, all the time, or lilac smell. So there's definitely and like I think Littlefinger is probably a craven, doesn't like physical confrontation. So it's likely that, you know, one or both of them are doing something. But I thought that was a bit strange with the Maester. I missed that. I missed that before. But since you've got it in my head about the Illuminati, you're like the Alex Jones of the Game of Thrones fandom.
I think when she's in the Godswood later on and she's thinking about kissing games with Littlefinger, she thinks about just the things that pop into Kat's head sometimes. It's like, well, is this just random childhood reminiscing? But she seems to think about things that, you know, you'd think that she'd be thinking about her sons in Winterfell, her daughters being held hostage in this situation, the fact that she's just lost her husband. I know that there is this in the books. It seems to be more prevalent in the TV show that she's grieving about Ned, but just some really strange, funny things that jump into her head about the games that her and Lysa and Littlefinger had the last time she thinks of the Godswood. And then obviously she does this thing at the end where she's kind of trying to urge for peace because she wants her daughters back. But again, you know, who's going to trade 2 Stark daughters for the Kingslayer? It makes no sense, Kat. As terrible as that sounds, but yeah. And then we get at the end of the chapter the great big, you know, King of the North bending the knee. Interesting that Mage Mormont says King of Winter rather than King in the North.
Yeah.
But yeah, you know, this chapter really is solidifying Rob's position. The whole like arrival at Riverrun, so we get a, you know, different scenery, and then just all these questions about, you know, it's only because we're picking this apart on this reread that we're deliberately asking these questions. Otherwise, it's very easy as a reader just to go through these chapters and not ask any of these questions. Why was he ill in the first place? They could have just dropped in a reference to an injury or something that kind of justified, okay, this is why her father's dying. But there isn't.
No. And there's lots of houses that get mentioned a lot, but they're not really that big. Like the Darys are mentioned a lot in the Tywin Tyrion chapters. The Darys were Targ supporters. So what's going on there? Like they seem to pop up a lot. And then going back to the prologue, you know, the Royce, like that's a big thing. But yeah, and here with Great John, it's interesting actually in hindsight to look at this, that the person missing, so the person who isn't there to pledge allegiance to Robb being the King of the North, is Roose Bolton.
Yes.
So that lets him off the hook politically later on. Yeah. Does Roose have to pledge fealty to Robb at any stage? I don't think he does, right? We never see that happening.
No, so, not that I can remember, no.
So is that why the rest of the North don't really take him out when later on in the series, when, you know, he becomes a bigger threat and he becomes more powerful in the North? It never really, politically, I never really twigged it before. He wasn't there, so he never actually declared that Robb was his king. So he's never actually committed treason in a way. Do you know, like?
Technically, yeah.
Oh, Tony, hi. Oh, Tony is listening while decorating the Christmas tree. Enjoy. That's always fun.
Did mine yesterday.
Oh, did you? Yeah. I love decorating. I love the old Christmas tree. But yeah, the Great John is the first to declare him the King of the North. He was the last to come on board. We will get into that. As we go into Clash, I'm going to be watching out more for Grand Northern conspiracies, potentially, as we go through Storm and stuff as well. Peace wasn't possible at this point, right? There's no hope for peace at this point.
No.
It is interesting, though, how they spend hours talking about this, whereas we don't get that impression in Tyrion's chapter. Tywin sends the lords away. Like he's doing it all on his own, whereas Robb is listening, and maybe to his detriment. maybe.
Yeah, they seem to. There seems like there's a need to rally around a figurehead, and Rob really has no choice in the matter. He can't stand up at this point and say, "Actually, no, king in the what? Sorry, not me." He's, you know, it's impossible for him to do that. This is the position that he's found himself in.
That's where you'd love a POV, isn't it? At the end of that chapter. Go straight to his head and then what the hell?
Yeah. Because I would love to know actually how much Rob is keeping from his mother at this stage, about any plans that he's got. You know,
a lot.
We'll
she
talk
says she
about
doesn't
that
even know if he's kissed a girl.
Yes.
Which I kind of maybe mothers don't know that stuff about their sons.
But I think he from this point forward definitely keeps quite a bit of stuff. I mean, the chapters to come where it's obvious actually that he's shunning her, and it's all to do with because everyone thinks he's annoyed that she let the Kingslayer go, but keeping things from her.
And maybe maybe it's also because, you know, he's lost his dad. There might be like an emotional defense mechanism there as well. But I am, after this reread, totally buying into my own theory that I think future Bran or past Bran, depending on how you look at it, has influenced Cat throughout this book at certain stages, and this is the chapter where we don't see any of that. So the fact that she's thinking about the girls even a little bit, the fact that she's got these nagging memories about Littlefinger, I think she's a little bit fragmented, probably in part because of shock and grief, but also I think she's coming together again, like mentally, because at this stage because she's been shut out, there isn't any need to interfere with her. Maybe it'll be interesting with the Jaime Brienne chapter to see if we get any of that kind of, I feel like, an intrusion in her inner monologue, and even some of the pieces are in italics and things, like it's more than just a normal inner monologue. There's something else going on there, particularly when she took Tyrion. But here, and also, as you said, the fact that she owns up that this is all her fault. So I feel like going into Clash, I'm going to be watching out for that when she gets a little bit of power back.
Yeah.
How much of that is her decision? I do think that there's been some outside influence on her. I don't know if it's Bran or something else, but there's something not right with Cat. There's something, and even the fact that she owns being a Stark more than a Tully, I feel, in this chapter. Like she owns that a little bit more. She wants to go back to Winterfell. She just wants to go back now. Whereas, like we were saying that before, why the hell did she go to River in the first place? But yeah,
she's just such an annoying character, I think. And she's annoying in that all she's been thinking about is Riverrun all the way through this book, and then she gets to Riverrun, and then she's thinking about somewhere else. She just like annoys me.
But I think if you do my thing where you may like falsely like look at maybe she's being influenced somewhere else by somebody else, it makes it easier even if it's not true.
It does. Well, it does make it easier.
It would make sense. Like, oh God. Why are you thinking about Littlefinger, you know, behind the bike sheds? It's not relevant. Well, maybe it is relevant, you know. Maybe you know, because Littlefinger does brag later on that he had Cat, and we know that he definitely had Lysa. So maybe he did have Cat. Maybe he wasn't lying, you know. But yeah, I think for me the one I took the most from here was
You there? Hello, Cat. Are you still there?
10.
So there you go. You disappeared for a minute or so then.
Oh, sorry. Oh,
you said the thing and then you stopped.
Okay. The thing that I was that really stood out to me was the Hoster stuff. That was the stuff that really stood out to me here.
Yeah.
Yeah, so then we're done with Cat 11, unless you have anything else to say.
No.
And then we're on to the last chapter, the very short, very magical chapter 10, or Dany 10. And what is this, 72, chapter 72 or something? Yeah, so chapter 72. And yeah, it goes from Cat, you know, there's a lot in Cat's chapter about marriage, her marriage, obviously to Ned, but obviously Hoster obsessing over the Blackfish's marriage, and then Cat with questions about Robb having made this huge promise, but it doesn't, he seems to be married to his sword more than to the idea of getting married. And then we go into this really weird scene where Dany compares the birth of the dragons to a marriage of sort, and there's very weird kind of sexual reproductive imagery here, which we'd expect, to be honest, but the fact that she thinks about it in a marital way is kind of strange as well. But yeah, so Dany 10, where do we start? Queen Dany.
I think the thing for me that came out of this chapter is it's very magical. So the fire is obviously magical because of the blood magic. Again, we get Mirri Mazda involved in all of this, and Daenerys is taking strength somehow, we don't know, from this whole situation and propelling herself forward with this, if I look back, I'm lost. And it just made me think about, how can I describe this, the kind of prophecy, if you like, or the mumbo jumbo that Mirri Mazda was talking about with the sun and the mountains and what have you. I think that Dany is this is the kind of birth of her I am a queen psyche rather than a princess or Khaleesi. She's a queen now. And I think that, you know, there's so many questions about who Quaithe is, or Quaithe, however you pronounce it. And is she, you know, is she Ashara Dane, or is she whoever? You know, there's a number of different theories about Quaithe. This chapter made me think that Quaithe is just a complete construct of Daenerys' mind, her psyche. So it's similar, I suppose, in a way to like an imaginary friend that you might have when you're little. He has used the concept of this mumbo jumbo prophecy from Mirri Mazda, but just disregarded it. And she's given herself these kind of prophecies, these self-fulfilling prophecies. If I look back, I'm lost, which is why I was saying to you, where did that come from? Did she? And I think it is because she, you know, she's invented this herself. So I'll be interested going forward, those incidents where she has these visions or whatever from Quaithe, when they happen, what's going on, what they mean, and what. Yeah, I'm going to be more interested this time, because I really do believe that Daenerys has conjured this character, and it's a construct of her own mind. It's interesting, I think, when Mirri Mazda is talking about blood magic being for the wise. Jorah saying to her, one day you will have dragon forged Valyrian steel blade. No, she's saying that to Jorah, which, you know, does he get Longclaw back in the end? You know, that's that brings that up. I didn't know. I completely had no idea that this chapter was the first time that we see the comet. Yeah.
Sorry. I'm so glad you said that, because I was like, I'm really stupid. I totally thought the comet was just a Clash thing.
Me too. Yeah, I thought it was.
That's okay. I feel better now.
It was something that came up. You know, each point of view character had an opinion on what, you know, what the symbolism was of this. But yeah, it was, they were waiting for the star to arrive to take Drogo away to you know, to the Nightlands, and that was it. That was the first star.
Were they waiting for the northern? I thought it was they were waiting for like what we would call like our North Star, because that's the first star we see just before sunset.
Yeah.
So, but then the comet comes, and they take that as the sign, right?
Well, it says the first star that they saw was fortuitous because it had a red tail with it, which and it was kind of like you say, you know, Drogo is the Carlist Carl, and so he would have a star that's more star than anything else, kind of thing.
Yeah. So Dany has caught up now with everybody else time-wise.
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah, because before she was way behind everybody, or way in front, right? It never quite lined up. But now when we go into Clash, everybody's going to be there. I don't know if we have the huge gaps. I don't think. Maybe I can't remember. I don't know if we have the huge timeline gaps like we do now.
I'm not sure.
I know. I'll keep an eye on it. But yeah, I just completely missed the comet.
I was surprised, and the whole sort of magical concept of like the fire is magical. She sees the things dancing around in the fire, and then she can see trees and animals and horses and flowers, and she sees Drogo smiling. So it's almost like, it kind of feels like she's drunk or she's under the influence of some weird stuff. And then you've got, you know, it all seems to kind of come together herself forward. And she's doing this herself, and she seems to know that, you know, it's a cleansing rebirth type of experience rather than, oh my God, it's, you know, it's just going to kill me. I thought it was interesting that and again, I didn't pick up on this the first time because it was just like, oh my God, dragons cracking as they hatched was as loud as thunder, which just, yeah, it just seems really kind of because I was like, how would you know that
the earth cracking or something as well? Wasn't one of them like?
Yeah, and where they were placed as well, like one was by Drogo's heart, like under his arm, kind of thing. You know, it was just but the fact that they sounded that loud when each of the eggs opened,
and the fact that they rolled down to her, which makes sense because the pyres, but it's almost like they're giving birth to her as much as she's giving birth to them. It's like it has to be Drogo. It couldn't have been anyone else. It has to be Drogo. It has to be Dany. It isn't just like, it couldn't have been, if she was married to Robert Baratheon, it wouldn't have worked. I think it has to be Drogo. I think that's really, really important, because the fact that she can see Drogo mounting his stallion. It also suggests that, like, she imagines seeing unicorns and wolves and bears and the whole lot in the shadows. Like, it's almost like all of creation, celestial, magical, whatever, is wrapped up in this event. It's not it has to be like two pure people coming together, pure in terms of their bloodline. I don't think, I don't think it matters if it, like, about Mirri Maz Duur. Do you think Mirri Maz Duur is essential? Like, I know she needs a life, but do you think it has to be Mirri Maz Duur that is put on that pyre? Could it have worked if she put anyone on that pyre?
Maybe it was that she was bringing that element of blood magic as well, if it was just from her knowledge, or the fact that she's intrinsically linked to Drogo's death, or both of them are, actually, Dany and Mirri Maz Duur.
Yeah, I was wondering with the singing as well. Is that like part of, like, Dany? Yeah. Like, yeah. I see. Eon's reader version of the Dany quote, if I read that phrase again, I'm lost.
Yeah.
Yeah. If we read
definitely.
that, we're lost. Yeah, you will get lost. There's lots of rabbit holes in the 5 or 6 years between books. But the Blood Riders refusing her because she's a woman, I think that's really, really important. George gets a lot of slack for the way he writes women, but George has only ever married or been with feminist writers, as far as I know. Actually, very famous feminist writers. But so he's definitely not. I think he writes women actually really well.
Yeah, me too.
I think he does a great job. But so I think that's really important at the end when it comes back to that idea that the Blood Riders refuse and then they accept her because she's not just because she's a queen, but she's a queen and a mother as well at the end. Like she's a queen and a woman. Like she says that as well, doesn't she?
Every bit of the Dothraki culture comes down to the core essence of they respect power, and she's just survived a fire and produced 3 dragons, which must just be the biggest sign of power. You know, I mean, there's only 100 of them left, actually, if you just think about the numbers. So how many did Drogo have in his Khalasar? Was it something
20,000 or something, was it?
I'm sure it was something ridiculous, like 100,000. It was massive. It was absolutely massive, and there was like there was only 100 left, and they were like,
and the old, the sick,
yeah.
It kind of defines what she's going to try and defend later.
But the ones that are left, they all become not just her blood riders, but they all of the Dothraki that are left, that witness this event, become blood of her blood. So all of them.
Yeah, all of them. Yeah, including Jorah.
Which, yes, which kind of does mirror what they tried. You know, what they did in the TV show.
Well, yeah, and I think I think as well with what was I going to say there? Oh yeah, with me saying that he's the Callus Cal and stuff. Like the Targaryens had been trying for years to successfully bring dragons back into the world, but it's probably because they were only interbreeding, right? That they didn't really have like a pure maybe Eastern line, or there's something like there's something really important. Like you said, she brings the Dothraki culture into this magical event. Like everything important happens outside.
Yeah.
Waiting for the star, waiting for nighttime. Yet there's even this weird thing where she gets into the hot water, and like the hot water enters her womb, like she feels it entering her. And then she says before she gets on the pyre, she's like, it's not hot enough yet. She's got this instinct for, and I'm torn as to how much of it is her, how much of it is free will, and how much of it is destiny. Like how much of it is, maybe it's both. But I
think there's a fair amount of self-fulfilling prophecy with Dany, but I think it has to be, again, self-preservation. She's aware that she is the only, and even in her waking hours, but also in her dreams, she has dreams of other Targaryens just whispering and fading away in front of her, and it being her. You know, she's the last. It's always Dany that's revealed. She's the last one, so I suppose, and she's a child, so maybe she is fabricating this. You know, she's constantly having to reinforce to herself, I'm the blood of the dragon, I am the dragon, I am, you know, and all of these kind of, this is what gives her strength, but also the Targaryen words, blood and fire. And I think she is convincing herself that that is something that she can utilize, that it's a cleansing thing for her. It gives her strength. It's part of who she is as a Targaryen. And again, you know, in this chapter, it's mentioned about is madness, is it too far from madness to wisdom? Because we get that in other Targaryen
Yeah, maybe she is mad.
Regents.
Maybe, yeah.
That kind of, you know, it wouldn't to me take that much more from the position that she's at the moment to tip into that flip side of the coin with Targaryens being like, you know, wanting to drink, you know, fire and actually think that they can become a dragon. But I mean, you know, this is what she dreams of. She dreams of that she's flying a dragon. She dreams that she is a dragon. But I think she's a lot of this is she's doing this to survive and constructing all of these things in her own mind to propel herself forward for what happens next.
Yeah, right. And I think, I know we've talked about maybe doing a stream with some others people about the elemental forces in Game of Thrones and how he uses them. This is a really good example of, well, obviously it's the most magical thing that's likely to ever happen in the series. There magical things happen, but this is the biggest one. And I am really interested in the idea of the celestial, the celestial influences and the influence of the comet. Like it is a dragon and egg thing, or a chicken and egg thing. Like like does the comet have to be there when the dragons come around? Like it's you know. It's one of those things that I'm interested in, and I know there's a lot of stuff, and I know I've mentioned the podcast before, but Lucifer means Lightbringer is really good on that kind of stuff if you're interested. Yeah, and you mentioned there about Jorah and the sword. I kind of feel that might be Lightbringer eventually, whatever he gets.
Yeah.
It certainly seems that seems to be what they're going for in the show, maybe. I do think it'll be Jorah. I think Jorah he'll die for her for sure. I don't think Jorah can make it to the end. He's a blood rider. If she goes, he goes.
Yeah,
that's it. Yeah. So yeah, that's it. That's all I had. It's a pretty short week this week, but yeah, that's all I had for Dany 10, the end of the novel. It is interesting that we start with the others and end with the dragons. You know, definitely the song of Ice and Fire is in this book.
And, absolutely, yeah.
He does say that the ending is mapped out somewhere in this book, but Claire, I don't think we figured it out yet.
No, I do think we've ended up with more questions. I think revisiting some of the characters' motivations, it has been interesting. You know, deconstructing some of particularly Ned, Cat. You can see where the kids are going to be going, the Stark children, what at least what flavour their fate is going to have. And yeah, you know, lots of different names are mentioned. All these families in the, like you said, in the Riverlands, Vance and Piper and the Brackens and the Blackwoods, and you know, we get mention of that, and we know that there's I think we need to pay attention to that as well as we're going through the other books. A Song of Questions Without Answers, definitely.
Yeah, I saw that.
But I think there are some things as well that have been in this reread where I wasn't sure about certain things, but it's been solidified for me. Like Tywin definitely was controlling who was around Tyrion. In fact, he was manipulating. He's been manipulating all his children, and why? You know, that's completely his thing. You know, that's that's not too much of a surprise, but
for me it's Cat and the influence of Bran. That's for me. And I mean I already thought that anyway, but just the Ned, the lies with Ned. And we've already talked about the Maesters. There's definitely something more to that, but I think we already thought that going into it.
Yeah,
but definitely
I
paying
think
attention to them more.
There's a lot of things as we've been going through that maybe on the first, second, third, sixth reread, you might think, you just go with it. You just read you just take what's been given to you like this open mouth receptacle. It just goes in. But this time we're actually chewing it over a little bit more and going, actually, hang on. Like what is wrong with Hoster? Why is he dying? Of what? And asking these questions that we would never have questioned before. We're just, oh, okay, we'll accept that for what it is, how it's written in the story.
And as you said, he's leaving breadcrumbs that he may or may not have any intention of picking up. He's just left himself enough breadcrumbs as well.
Yes, yeah, and we know that from his writing style that he's done. It's up to us to decipher which ones are red herrings, which ones are really foreshadowing, which ones are meaningful. But he's admitted this himself, that he's burrowed clues into the stories really deep, because he himself appreciates that whole fandom and rereading and rediscovering certain things, and oh my god, I never realized that. Yeah. Absolutely. So he understands the joy of discovering, I didn't no idea that the comet made an appearance in this chapter. But I think there are things that are burrowed into the text. Absolutely.
So I've one last question for you. Of all of the secondary characters that we've met, who going into Clash, if you were going into Clash having never read it before, who would you, including Kings if you like, who would you most like to be getting a point of view chapter from? I think it's surprising who you do end up getting point of view chapters from, like Theon, for instance. But who would you most, and maybe you got that person in Clash, but who would you most like to hear from?
I think I had somebody then, and it's just completely dropped out of my head. When you said Theon, I went somewhere else.
Sorry.
I think I could just come back to me. I did have somebody in mind, and it's
for me, it's somebody that I've said I think we're still going to get an epilogue or prologue from. I'm still interested. Not that it would be very good right now from the point of view of a 4-year-old, but I'm still interested in hearing from Rickon's point of view. I think he has some kind of hidden knowledge he may not even be aware of the crypts. I think there's something with Rickon. But I think the king I'd most like to hear from is Stannis. He's the one that I most want to see. Even though later on we're going to actually probably learn more about Stannis than any other king. He's definitely the one that I'm most interested in, just based on going into Clash. So I'm very happy that we get like a point of view around him.
I mean, I think apart from, I've thought of who it is now, apart from obvious characters like Littlefinger and Varys, you'd love to be able to know exactly what was going on in their heads, and that's part of the fun of the story. I wish that even just for one chapter, like we did with Melisandre, that we got an insight or a point of view from Sandor, from the Hound.
Oh, that's a good one. Yeah, that's a good one. Yeah,
just from the whole, everything so far in this chapter in Game of Thrones, in this book.
Someone even like Hoster might be interesting as well at this stage.
Oh yeah.
But I think, I think with Stannis as well, like I feel when we do get into the Davos stuff, it is, for me, I really look forward to those kind of chapters from Davos. I really like those chapters. And Eon says, King Stannis. Yeah, absolutely. It's definitely the biggest black hole in Westeros right now. What's going on down with Stannis? And I'm kind of, that's the one that I'm most looking forward to seeing in Clash. And I'm glad that he mixes it up. He mixes up the voices a bit in Clash in there. So that's all for me. Do you have anything else you want to add, Claire?
No, just to let everyone know that we're going to be taking a break for the rest of this month, and We are going to be picking this up again. I've thrown the
January
date
the
away
7th.
now. The 7th, which is a
Yeah.
Sunday.
Yes, and I
Okay.
will put up an announcement video in the next week. I will figure out a schedule for us. I'll try and keep it to the 10 weeks, but I don't think that's possible with Clash. It's a bit longer. So we might go to 11 or 12 weeks with Clash. We've time now. Unless he announces, you know, that they're rolling out wins in 2018. We can afford to take 11 or 12 weeks to Clash. And yeah, so if you guys start reading, let us know if there's any questions that you want us to answer. Let us know in the comments, or you know, whatever it is you want to do. And thank you so much, Claire, for doing this. It's been brilliant talking everything through.
I've really enjoyed it.
I just remembered another thing that is cemented with me. I'm totally convinced that Jon Arryn and Stannis were staging a coup. I'm totally convinced about that. Going out this one. And thank you to AU John for joining us as well for one of our sessions. And thank you to everybody who's dropped into the chat and the comments and everything. It's been brilliant. And yeah, we get reading Clash. Get straight into it. And yeah, so thanks, Claire. And I hope everybody has a lovely holiday and Christmas and New Year and the whole lot. So goodbye, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.